Welcome to Good Game, I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo.
Bajo, this week we check out a game that's half sequel, half DLC, and half a reboot. Wait.
Download a sequel boot.
Also this week, sci-fi and horror collide in a new survival game.
A horrible survival, horror.
What was that? Whoa!
What's going on?
I think this place is about to collapse. What do I do?
And a clown is looking for acceptance in a point-and-click adventure.
Clownceptance.
No.
But before all that, can you name the game for this week?
Frictional Games, the developer behind Amnesia: The Dark Descent, have brought us a new survival horror adventure called Soma, this time set deep beneath the ocean.
Well, we can start whenever you're ready.
Hello, is there anyone there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Upslot, what's going on?
Hey, look, this place is not... There's something seriously wrong here. Hello?
After the Earth's surface is destroyed by an asteroid, a group of scientists in the sub-facility Pathos 2 are struggling to stay alive. You play as Simon, who is exploring the facility and trying to piece together the scientists' plan to save humanity.
Immediately you realise something has gone very wrong down here, and that classic investigative thriller vibe sets in as you take in your surroundings.
It's quite reminiscent of Bioshock, being an underwater facility, especially since it's all abandoned and run down.
This is insane!
There's mystery and history there.
Yeah, and while there is certainly a horror gameplay element to this, with enemy encounters to avoid similar to the Amnesia games, I think the Frictional devs have always been storytellers first and foremost, a trait that's even more prominent in Soma than in their previous games. You are placed in an incredibly uneasy environment and made to slowly piece together the narrative from clues, letters, and other bits of evidence left behind.
I really wish I was able to say this without the sky falling down.
I do think some may find that lack of action a bit disappointing for a game that calls itself survival horror, but it's that threat of danger that's always there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I find underwater stuff really creepy as it is.
Not a fan of the ocean?
It's just anything submarine, you know, it evokes a sense of claustrophobia in me. And exploring this ghost town of a science facility is equal parts wondrous and unnerving.
If we are able to save even just a small piece of ourselves, why wouldn't we do that?
That suspense is so well crafted.
It really is. The facility itself is unstable and has been abandoned for some time. And a big part of the gameplay is trying to figure out what this alien-like organism is that seems to have taken over, presenting you with some pretty gruesome scenes.
Hey, are you...
Don't hurt me.
Can I help?
It won't let me die.
Most of the puzzle solving you do is finding the right access code to log into systems, and diverting what limited power there is left to gain access to new areas. That sort of thing.
I like the way you navigate the facility too. The internal environments are really interesting, dark and creepy, but you'll also travel in trains, escape pods and zeppelins. Whatever you can manage to get working.
I loved also that there were parts of the game that you'd spend out in open water. And that was something that I always found was a bit disappointing that the original Bioshock games lacked. Here you feel vulnerable in a whole new way when you're just wandering around the ocean floor. And this is a beautiful looking game too, isn't it?
It is. The lighting is moody, all the environments have wonderful detail. There's always something magical to look at. And it all runs smoothly too.
Yeah, I was impressed. They managed to make relatively small areas feel vast and expansive, which is clever design, I think.
I did find myself getting a little bit lost in the labyrinth of tunnels, or even in the open ocean sections. Part of the puzzle of this game, I think, is simply finding your way. But I found it just hit that perfect sweet spot of just when I was starting to get frustrated and going around in circles, I stumble across a ladder or a door.
Plus, it's through that exploration that you uncover more of those juicy pieces of story that slowly begin to answer all the questions you have about what happened here.
You saw that, right? You saw Akers injecting that shit into them?
He got me pretty bad.
Bajo, I thought the story was incredible.
I loved it too. We won't reveal too much, but it explores ideas and themes of artificial intelligence and human consciousness, and what it is that makes us truly human.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's intriguing and at times quite sad. I mean, I loved Amnesia, but I found the narrative here so much more compelling.
Yeah, it's quite existential without being overly complex. It makes you question the very nature of your own existence, which is a pretty great achievement for a video game.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, I love a game that lets me rifle through people's stuff. And it's so worth looking through every personal belonging you come across, reading every email and checking all the log entries.
It really makes you think about what it means to be human.
Because it really does reveal so much of the larger picture.
Yes, and this is something we're used to doing in narrative games, but the atmosphere in Soma is always so tense and frightening. It just adds that extra layer of urgency to your investigations.
Yeah, plus it's in these moments that you'll often be faced with enemies.
Careful! I think it's back.
Like Frictional's other games, there's no combat mechanic. You can only run or hide. Monsters generally defeat you if you let them get too close. Or like Slender Man, if you look at them for too long.
Being so vulnerable and with no way to defend yourself, it makes for some pretty terrifying encounters. The enemies in these games are always some kind of twisted, deformed beasts that lurk in the darkness. Really creepy stuff.
Oh man, the sounds alone are terrifying. Hearing their footsteps coming down the hall, let alone when they rush at you.
You do have help on your journey.
Hi, Simon. I'm Catherine. Have you figured out what's going on yet?
A scientist named Catherine, who guides you through the various substations and explains much of what the scientists were working on.
It was just a pet project at first, but it got really serious after the comet took out the surface. Then suddenly it became very important, and it was officially named the Ark.
And that's not a common device of this style of game, having that radio voice, but I get why it works.
Yeah, there's only so many bits of paper you can read. Having that interaction is much more involving.
Thanks, Simon. Don't be mad, okay? We really needed that chip.
Plus, it staves off the loneliness, doesn't it? Having that voice with you, both for you and the character.
Yeah, definitely. It's someone to forge a connection with. How did you find this all up?
Well, I do enjoy narrative games, but when it comes to survival horror, I am craving a bit more action to raise the stakes. Just a few more encounters would have been nice. Still, I think this is some of Frictional's best work. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Well, this had me hook, line, and sinker. I mean, I think they balanced the action well, but really it is that story that drives it. I just love being kept in that state of unease and tension, yet with this unrelenting curiosity and desire to find out more. I absolutely recommend Soma. I'm giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars.
Here's what's making headlines. Several prominent video game voice actors could potentially go on strike. Members of the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, including Jennifer Hale, David Hayter, and Ashley Birch, have all voted in favour of the strike unless an agreement with games publishers can be made. Among their demands include bonuses if a game sells more than 2 million copies, increased transparency in business deals, stunt pay for stressful recording sessions, and a stunt coordinator for demanding motion capture sessions. If enough members of the union vote to strike by the 5th of October, the actors will stop work.
This isn't about strategy or tactics. This is about survival.
Electronic Arts has removed 13 female players from FIFA 16 following concerns their appearance in the game would jeopardise their eligibility for college sports. After the National Collegiate Athletic Association contacted the publisher regarding the issue, they agreed to remove the players. EA did, however, say they did not agree there was a conflict, as all rights had been secured and the student athletes weren't going to be compensated for their appearance in the game. However, they still removed them to ensure there was no risk to their eligibility. The long-running contest to hold the highest score in the arcade classic Donkey Kong saw the world record score topple twice in the space of just 6 hours. During the recent Donkey Kong Online Open event, Wes Copeland managed to score an impressive 1,170,500 points, beating out the former champion Robbie Lakeman's score by just over 12,000 points. However, the record did not stand long, as Lakeman was also competing in the event. He managed to quickly regain his crown as King of Kong after beating Copeland's new high score by almost 2,000 points. Copeland did, however, retain one record, becoming the first player to ever score more than 1.1 million points on their first life. And And that's all for this week.
Dropsy is a point-and-click adventure about a clown who just wants to make people happy. Clowns have been around for hundreds of years, and they've been used to both entertain but also offer an uneasy reflection at just how silly we can be.
Clowns also wear masks for a reason. It hides the true self of the performer and also promotes that uncanny valley that something's just not quite right. And that's why in movies and video games, they're often pretty terrifying.
For my first murders, I chose the perfect targets.
And much like the idea of the clown itself, Dropsy's exterior is scary, but it's not what he really is. It's not what lies beneath the makeup. The game begins in a dream sequence, where we learn of an apparent accident which burns down Dropsy's circus tent.
I'm already upset.
Dropsy wakes from a twisted nightmare thinking of those he's lost and sets about his day. He's quickly joined by his companion, a bloody-faced puppy. Aww.
Oh look, a bloody puppy!
And it's here where you realise that your objectives in this game are quite different from your standard point-and-click adventure, for the most part. Dropsy just wants to make sad people happy.
Yeah, and give them a really creepy kiss sometimes too.
That is pretty creepy. In fact, it's the creepiest thing I've seen in a game all year. But you know what they say, Hex? Creepiness is in the eye of the beholder. Hex, I love that Dropsy's main ability is to hug.
Yeah, and it's quite exciting when someone actually lets you hug them. And by exciting, I mean horrifying. Oh, that victory screen, Bajo, the squiggly arms. I do like that your objectives aren't laid out for you, though. It's up to the player to discover the point of this game and to delve into the motivations and tortured mind of Dropsy.
The gameplay itself is quite simple, but it's far from easy. The language of this game is in pictures, and you'll have to work out what people, and strangely animals, want based on imagery and their current predicament.
Hungry chicken.
This involves Dropsy collecting whatever he can around the world in a kind of scavenger hunt, and then using these items to make people happy or complete some sort of objective. You're helped by the animals you gather along the way, a bird and a mouse, along with Pup, and when you have all the animals together and you're walking through the town, it turns into kind of a wacky, fantastic journey.
Yeah, the scavenging and the puzzle solving can be a little illogical. There are a few red herrings, and sometimes you get the sense that only the game's creator understands the reasoning behind some of it. It's still strangely rewarding when you do solve something, though.
Yeah, so squiggly arms. I think helping the player in these kinds of games is always a tricky line to walk.
Yeah, and with this art style, it's so easy to miss something, and that can lead to frustration. Things do get better a couple of hours in when you unlock the clown car. It lets you fast travel, which greatly speeds up backtracking. Bajo, I think some sort of highlight or hint system might have helped this flow a little bit better.
I'm in two minds about it. I quite liked that I had to go online and scour forums and videos just to find out some information to get through this. To go back to the old LucasArts days, where you actually have to talk to people who are playing the game at the same time to try and finish it. It's part of the experience.
Yeah, I just have a short fuse for getting stuck, and it just happened a little bit too often for my liking. I'm glad I don't have to worry about combining inventory items, which is common for these kinds of games and would have just overcomplicated Dropsy.
I really liked how one of your biggest problems is that no one actually wants to be near or communicate with Dropsy.
Well, perhaps that's because he spends too much time reaching into his pants to pull out various items, Bajo.
Perhaps, Hex. It's an interesting game mechanic, this social barrier that you need to knock down before you can complete objectives. And sometimes all it takes is a hug or a fist bump.
Yeah, I like that too, and you can't help but feel sympathy for Dropsy. He's obviously misunderstood and struggles with day-to-day life, but deep down he just wants to make people happy and be accepted. And I think that's something that's relatable for many of us.
Indeed, Hex. I think at times we've all felt a bit like Dropsy. There's also a day-night cycle, which adds a new twist to the puzzles as people move about and shops close at night.
The art style is such a lovely throwback to the LucasArts days too.
Yeah, absolutely. Although maybe it's a little bit too retro for full screen on a big monitor.
Yeah, windowed is much clearer. I do like this world and the way it's set up. Each location Dropsy visits is full of quirky characters and ideas. There are funny and sweet little stories just peppered throughout this game.
Yeah, it certainly is creative. Now Hex, I know you're not a huge fan of clowns, but did you enjoy your time with Dropsy anyway?
I mean, once I got past the creepy factor, I mostly did. I think many gamers might dip into this out of curiosity and the fact that you're playing a clown and it's got this twisted vibe to it. But I also think they'll give up after an hour or so because of the difficulty and the retro design.
Yeah, for some reason, Hex, this really pulled me in. And I think a lot of it has to do with that music. I could happily leave this game just playing in the background, those soothing jazz tunes. Which can also turn into a mechanical trance nightmare.
Oh, I do not like those dream sequences one bit. No, thank you. I found this game bizarre, funny, unpleasant, and uncomfortable all at the same time. But there is a lot more to Dropsy than the creep factor. In fact, I would call this an uplifting journey if you're willing to put in the effort. I'm giving it 2.5 stars.
Yeah, I think it is uplifting, and the ending is awesome and sweet and everything I wanted it to be. There's quite a lot underneath the surface of this tragic clown's adventure. I'm giving it 4 stars.
There are 8 million Easter eggs out there in the world. This is but one of them. Oh, great, it's the lunch menu, lol. Hi, I'm Dave Callan, Games Investigator. You know, I love it when games hide references to other games within the games. It's almost like everyone in games really admires the work of the games that other games people make. In the Unfinished Swan, if you travel to the top of the tallest tower, you'll find a large telescope. Look through and zoom all the way in to spy 2 familiar scarf wearers, about to set off on a journey. Oh, isn't that lovely? What next? A framed photo of Gabe Newell on Lara Croft's bedroom wall? I'll leave you with that warm and fuzzy thought.
Thanks, Dave. It's been a year since Bungie's big online shooter Destiny came out, and to kick off year 2, we have its 3rd and biggest expansion yet, The Taken King.
With his last breath, he reached out across the night. The night has answered. This was all part of the plan.
Ah, Destiny. It's proven to be quite the divisive game, hasn't it?
Yes, it can be a love it or hate it experience. The shooting and looting was great, but the story was a bit rubbish. And there wasn't really enough content to keep the end game from becoming too repetitive.
But The Taken King has pretty much overhauled the whole experience, and now with 3 new expansions, there's a lot of new content here.
The big question is it worth sticking around for now, or is this the same old Destiny?
Well, let's take a look at the story, which I'm still a little confused by, to be honest. There's this guy, Oryx, who is the Taken King, and he's angry because we killed his son, Crota, in the first DLC's raid, so he's out for revenge and we have to stop him. Which is straightforward enough, I guess, but the whole space god, space magic thing just leaves me a little bit lost.
Yeah, there's some pretty dense lore to dig into if you want to understand it, but I think they've done a much better job at the presentation of the story this time around. There's some great cutscenes that go a long way to making this feel like a more exciting and fleshed out universe. Not to mention the star of the show is the robot Cade 6, played by Nathan Fillion.
Huh. You know, you're a true artist. Can't even see the join.
Yeah, Robo-Fillion was great, and I feel like he was a voice for players like me who maybe were a little bit lost.
They are taken.
Eris, get your rock off my map.
He's very flippant of the deeper lore and just encourages you to get in there and shoot, which helps stops things from feeling way too serious.
Cade, our discussion is not yet concluded.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm leaving.
Speaking of voices, after much fanfare was made over Game of Thrones actor Peter Dinklage voicing your ghost companion, you'll find now that he's gone.
Yes, he's been completely replaced and revoiced by the omnipresent voice of gaming, Nolan North.
Praise Nolan.
Praise Nolan.
You think they can see us? I think they can see us!
Which I hear came down more to the availability of Peter Dinklage than his performance, even though it was universally panned.
He did sound pretty bored. It sounded like he didn't actually want to be there. But also Dinklage, it just makes me feel like Tyrion is talking to me, and that pulled me out of the experience a bit. Nolan is the right way to go, I think. His take on the world is really good. And now the ghost is somewhat useful, and can scan bits of the environment for extra story.
Skyburner's regiment. Dead, obviously. There are no other guardians here.
Or even reveal hidden platforms.
How about you let me out and I'll take a look?
But let's talk about what else is new. Along with the usual array of new missions and strikes, there's also an entirely new faction of enemies to fight, known as the Taken.
They're technically just all the old enemies, except they've been sucked up by Oryx and transformed into his Taken slaves. And these versions completely remix how each enemy moves and fights.
That's just an image I collected from the world's grave. A dreadnought.
Also, because he takes all the different species and mashes them together into one army, you get whole new enemy combinations to deal with, which is great.
They are a clever way to refresh the combat, but let's be honest, they're basically just a new version of Halo's Flood, aren't they? Only with a different type of space zombification.
Yeah, pretty much. I enjoyed fighting these guys more than the Flood, though.
The other major addition is the new destination, the Dreadnought, which is Oryx's big ship that settled into Saturn's rings after blasting a big hole in them.
Jerk move, Oryx. That's our prettiest planet. It's nice to see a new destination, though, on top of the game's original 4 planets, although I still would like to see more. It is space, after all. It's pretty big. The Dreadnought is quite small, too. You can't even fly your Sparrow around in it. But as they say, it's not the size that matters, it's how you use it, and they have used this space in a few interesting ways. It's loaded with little secrets and chests that you'll have to figure out how to open.
And it's also got a thing called the Court of Oryx, which lets you summon some big bosses into a little arena. I like that most of the bosses have some interesting mechanic to defeating them so that they're not just big bullet sponges. And it's good that it's in a public space so that you'll often get strangers wandering in and forming groups to take them on.
There's also been a lot of tweaks and changes since vanilla Destiny. Things like more storage space and collections for your loot, and more streamlined currencies. But one of the biggest changes is that they've completely reworked the leveling system.
Yes, I mean previously once you'd hit level 20, you'd then just have to find gear with light to increase your level any further, which I think turned quite a lot of players off once they realised they'd then just have to grind and wait for decent gear to drop.
Yeah, it was a stupid system.
Do not apologize.
But now you can hit the new level cap at 40 just by earning XP.
He lives again.
You will still need good gear though, since your light level has become an extra stat based on the average of all of your gear's attack and defense ratings. And if you don't have enough light, you won't be able to take on the game's toughest challenges.
Yeah, but thankfully it's a much quicker process to get decent gear now. The loot system is way more generous, with the enemies regularly dropping loot while bosses basically shower you with it.
Valus Ta'ark has finally been defeated and the Cabal command dealt a great blow.
One thing longtime players might be upset about is that every single piece of armor from year 1 is now complete trash. Classic MMO. Even the best legendary guns from last year will do less damage than most of the worst guns from year 2. Although you can upgrade a handful of year 1 exotics to year 2 levels.
And while there is actually a new way to improve pieces of gear by sacrificing a higher level piece to infuse it with more power, you can't actually do that to gear from year 1, only the new stuff. Ah, so frustrating.
Yeah, but I think for die-hard players, having all of this new gear to chase is exciting enough. Plus for new players or lapsed players, it levels the playing field a bit.
Another massive change is the new quest system, which basically strings together a bunch of steps like completing missions or breaching certain requirements.
It's a good system because it makes sure you have a constant stream of stuff to do. And I liked that they offer guaranteed rewards too, which removes some of the randomness from loot drops and gives you something definite to work towards.
Yeah, like the quest that gives you one of the best new additions to the game, the sword.
Oh, at last, Hex, they've been teasing us with swords since the game came out, and now finally we can have swords of our own. Also, each class has a great new subclass, which you'll unlock through a quest. The Warlock gets to become a Sith Lord. The Titans get to hurl explosive flaming hammers. And Hunters get a sweet bow that can tie enemies down.
The quests also slowly drip feed you a bunch of brand new missions as well. So while you can get through the main story missions in a few hours, you'll still have a steady stream of new content to work through.
Get in there, clean out the ticket, and give yourself a pat on the back. In that order.
But all of that is mere icing on the cake for the most dedicated players out there. The most exciting thing for them is the new Kingsfall raid.
Yes, raids are the ultimate challenge in Destiny, where 5 teams of 6 delve into day-long ordeals and try to earn themselves the best loot in the game. We haven't managed to get our own characters up to raid level yet, but some of the Good Game Office team have, and from what we've seen, it's bonkers.
So that's most of what's new, but there's also a bunch of new multiplayer stuff. There are 8 new maps and a couple of new modes, with Rift, which has teams trying to get a spark back to a rift.
You're the runner, Guardian. Run!
It's sort of like Advanced Warfare's uplink.
They stopped you.
All up, I'd say there is as much in this expansion as there was in the original game. That said, if you already own Destiny and have bought all the expansions since, this is still going to set you back $70, which feels a bit steep to me.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but Destiny fans seem pretty stoked with it. I guess it all comes down to how much you enjoy your Destiny. What are you going to give it overall, Hex?
Well, it is hard to score just this expansion. We kind of need to rescore the whole Destiny experience. And it has come a long way since launch. The story is still a bit of a mess in my opinion, but there's just so much to do now and a lot of fun to be had doing it. So I'm giving it 4.
I think the most important thing is that Bungie have really listened to their fans, and it absolutely shows, and the game is better for it. So I'm going to give it 4.5.
Infiltrate a dreadnought above Saturn's rings, so we can knock out its weapons, create a transmat zone, and send in the cavalry.
Guys, did you name the game for this week? It was the point-and-click adventure The Neverhood from 1996. You played as Clayman as he sought to discover his origins and purpose in life. The game made the unique choice to employ claymation rather than traditional 2D animation, which caught the eye of Steven Spielberg, who released it through his company, DreamWorks Interactive. And it's unnamed the game as it was cited as a major influence on the team that made this week's Dropsy.
Next week on the show, the Command and Conquer inspired act of aggression.
Let them know we coming. The motto is no mercy. You should be afraid, young, and you should be already running. Cause I am already gunning for the top of lobby for making something out of.
And if you have an interest in competitive gaming, then we have Good Game Well Played, a show that looks at the competitive esports scene in Australia and around the world, hosted by Hingers.
Maps will generally have subtle advantages depending on what the racial matchup in the game is. By which I mean the in-game races, not like if it's a European guy versus an Asian guy or something.
And you can find Well Played on iView and YouTube every Wednesday afternoon.
Until next week, Bajo out.
Hex out. Is it because I did it?
It's not all about you, Hex. It's not all about... Yes.